I don't have to like everything about a human being in order to respect them as a person. And even if I don't believe what they believe, even if I don't respect their views, I can still respect them and treat them as a human being. And I think that that's a good place for us to be, especially in the society right now, and we wouldn't have such vitriolic politics.
Hello, and welcome to today's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. My name is Ladaris Cordell, retired judge and author of Her Honor, My Life on the Bench, What Works, What's Broken, and How to Change It. And I'm delighted to moderate today's program. The club thanks the Bernard Osher Foundation for supporting this good lit event. It is my pleasure to introduce the one and only Don Lemon, award-winning journalist and author of I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. Don spent 3 decades on local and national TV and was a longtime anchor at CNN. Now he is the host of The Don Lemon Show that can be streamed on all platforms. Welcome back to the club and congratulations on your new book.
Thank you, Judge. Should I call you Judge or Ladaris?
Oh, whatever makes you happy.
Thank you so much. It's really a thrill to be here once again. I'm honored.
Well, we're glad to have you. And so we're going to have a wonderful conversation. I'm going to start off with this, Don. Okay, you have an idea for a book. You want to title, I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. So you call your literary agent and you say, I want to write a book about God. And your agent says, wait, what? And then you pitch it to your agent. Now, I don't know if this actually happened. If it did, fine. Tell us what you did say. If it didn't, what would you have said if that was the scenario? Make your pitch.
My pitch would have been an easy one, I have to tell you, because I would have said, now I have this idea and I want to write a book. It's about God, but it's also about what's happening now in the world. So all of it relates. I'm going to bring together what's happening politically, and not only in America, but in some ways around the world, in Russia and Ukraine and on and on. And I want to bring it in context to religion and how it's infecting our politics, and it's pushing us towards theocracy. And then I would say, and do you guys remember back around 2013, 14, 15, not around 2015 or 16, and I said, I had this great idea about writing a book about race and what I say to my friends about racism. And you said, no, nobody would want that book. And then George Floyd happened and you said, Don, where's that book? And I wrote the book and it debuted at #1. So trust me on this idea. That's what I would have said.
Well, you sold me. So I'm delighted that you wrote the book. So let's just talk a bit about it now. You write about Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church in Port Allen, Louisiana, and you write about the women who raised you. So give us a teaser about what it was like growing up. I don't want you to leave the whole thing because people need to read the book, but give us a teaser.
About growing up in the church?
Yeah, and also growing up in a household of women, grandmother, mother, sisters.
I grew up in a household of all women. My mom was divorced. And then I write in my previous book about how I eventually came to have a relationship with my father. I didn't know he was my father, but I grew up in a house full of women, and most of the people in my family were, my aunts had girls. My one aunt had all boys, but everybody else pretty much had girls. So I grew up with all women. And the first thing I write about in the book, I start the book with a letter to my sister who died suddenly in 2018. And I write to her as if she's in heaven, and that I tell her about what's going on in my life. And I write about that I want advice from her. And then I wake up and I remember that she's not there. Right. But then I start off talking about us in the church as kids. And my first, I don't know if it's brush or encounter with the Holy Spirit is sitting on my grandmother's lap. And we're in church and the piano's going and the preacher's going and I write about it. And the preacher does a thing about, and the Lord said, and then the piano player goes down, down. And then the organ player goes, boom. And then everyone gets all excited and inspired. And the next thing you know, my grandmother is shouting, she's got the Holy Spirit, and blam, I'm sitting on her lap and I hit the floor. And that was my first brush with the Holy Spirit. That woke me up and shook me. And my sisters grabbed me and pulled me up. And then every woman who was near me in the church came to scoop me up. And I write that they have embraced me in their warm bosom, ample, I think I say something bosom, not in a weird way. And they have protected me and they've stood with me my entire life. Starting from that moment is when I remember it.
Wow. And that moment, yeah, I think you're right. You were what, like 3 years old, 4 years old?
3 years old. And
Right.
I would not have remembered the story probably if my sister didn't tell it all the time. She's like, and Don hit the floor, started crying, and we tried to pick him up. And then I remember because my grandmother, you know how you shake, Mrs. Johnson came, you know, you shake kids on your knee. And
Yeah.
I was crying in her bosom and she's shaking me on her knee. And I'm like, and so there you go.
It's a great story. It's a great story and a wonderful way to start off the book. So, like you, Don, I was raised in a Black Baptist church, and my two sisters and I went to Sunday school and then church service where we sang in the choir. My father was a trustee, and our mother was the church clerk who read the announcements every Sunday. And like you, Don, I am gay, but I didn't quite know it until I was a grown-up. So talk about how you reconcile being gay with being a Christian, especially when homophobia continues to be no stranger in the Black church.
All right, how I reconcile being a Christian. I want to answer that, but let me ask you: you were in the? I was in the cherubim choir. Were you in the cherubim choir, the little kids choir? Is that what you guys?
We started off in the little kids, and then there was a young adult choir.
Okay, we called it the cherubim choir when I was a kid. Yes. So Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church. How did I reconcile? Well, for the longest time, I have to tell you that I thought that I was. That my life was going to have to be secret forever. And then I would not be able to be myself, and that I would probably either end up having to marry a woman to keep up, to keep pretenses and to keep the nosy, inquiring minds out of my business, or I would just be a confirmed bachelor for the rest of my life. But I didn't think that my relationship would ever be public. And I thought that I was an abomination because that's what they taught me in church. But as I grew up and started to understand that people interpret the scriptures in ways that they want to interpret the scriptures, and that my interpretation and my religion and my faith teaches me that God is not some big boss on top of us that's, that is judging us, because he says, judge not. And, someone who would create, or some entity that would create something bad, and so that it would have to suffer for the rest of its life, that it was incompatible and antithetical to what faith, God, and the Bible are, and Christ for me. I'm talking Christ because I was a Christian. If I was another religion, I would speak in that, with that form of deity. Okay. So, and so as I got older, I had critical thinking and an open heart. And, the evangelicals, well, we'll get into that. So I had critical thinking and an open heart, and I treated myself with the same critical mind, my religion, and the same open heart that I projected upon and treated everyone else with. And I had the simple thing: if you treat others the way you want to be treated, right, then you have to treat yourself the way that you would want to be treated. And so that's how I reconciled my faith, is that my God was not a judgmental God. My God would not have created something that's a mistake, or something that has to be hidden, or something that wasn't loving. And so I, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but I also did unto myself as I would have myself do unto me and to others.
So that was a process that you worked through.
A long process.
Yeah. Long process. So you have a wonderful quote in your book by James Baldwin, and it's this: the trouble with a secret life is that it is very frequently a secret from the person who lives it, and not all the secret for the people he encounters.
Yeah.
You came out to your parents when you were a young adult, and you describe how they handled the news in your book and this is your quote: "This is how freedom of religion works." What do you mean?
Well, it took me till I was 30 to come out. And I think some people in my family didn't want it to be true. My dad was like, I've always known, and it doesn't matter. And my mom, I guess just the realization that it was true for her, but she had to have known. But she says she didn't. I thought that she did because I would help her get dressed for their clothes. And, maybe I was just interested in fashion. I don't know. But anyways, I thought that my mom always knew because I never had girlfriends for a long time. And your question was, you said, how did what? What was the question?
So you write in your book that you came out to your parents and you said
The secret.
This is how freedom of religion works.
Right.
That's how you describe how they handled the news.
Right. This is how
What did you mean by that?
Well, I meant the freedom that they were able to have with their religion, the freedom that they allowed me when I was a kid to study with the Jehovah's Witnesses, the freedom that they gave me to be able to go to a Catholic school and also a Baptist church on Sunday and to be baptized a Baptist, that it was to be my decision about what I wanted to do with my life as it related to the religion that I wanted to practice, what my God and my faith would look like. That's what it was for me. So I am strong enough and smart enough, as you know, and man enough to be able to decide how I want to worship and how I want to celebrate my life. And so I should be man enough to know and smart enough to know and self-possessed enough to know that this is who I am. And so my religion is my religion. Your religion is your religion. I'm not judging you. You shouldn't judge me. There should be a separation, as there is a separation of church and state. There should be a separation of family and religion. And so I love you. You worship the way you want to worship. You love me, and I can live the way that I want to live. My religion should have nothing to do with your love for me, and vice versa. You
have a wonderful little story in the book about the Jehovah Witness lady. They come to the front door and knock. But you had more than one interaction with the Jehovah Witness lady, right?
I did.
So just briefly, kind of tell us about that.
My dad was in the garage one day and I was in the house, and this Jehovah's Witness lady came by, as they often did. And, sometimes we would just say, no, thank you, or whatever. But my dad sent her in. And here's me as a kid. I'm like, I don't know why he sent her in, but I said, all right, maybe it's a sign. And she started talking to me and I started talking to her. And I'm sure she thought I was this little odd kid. And I was also a smarty pants and a smart mouth. And so I said, I'm going to sit down with this lady and I'm going to study with her. So we studied for a while, for a couple months. And my parents would hear in the background, what she was teaching, the teachings and what I was learning. And there came a certain part in the Bible, because it's different Bibles, right, for Jehovah's Witnesses. And it came to a point where my mom, after a while, said, okay, that's enough. And I said, okay, yeah, that's enough. But she listened, and she said, I think the next time that there would be no next time, because she didn't like that she was teaching me about not loving people because of who they are. She was teaching me that homosexuality and all of those things were evil. And my mom, that was not my mom. My mom was never judgmental. She may have had some fear for me being gay because she didn't want me to be hurt, right? She was trying to protect me, but not because she was would be ashamed of anyone or a child of being gay. Her brother was gay. She was the first person he came out to. So, she said enough, because my mom did not teach hate of anyone. And that was the last time that I studied with the Jehovah's Witness lady.
Oh, interesting. So one last thing on this topic, and then there's so much more.
Also, did you read the story where I ran into a Jehovah's Witness on the plane?
Yes.
And I read about him.
Yes. Yeah. So these are great, because I'm not going to go, some of these I want to be teasers. People need to read this book. So I'm going to just one other on the same subject. So in the acknowledgments to your book, you mentioned the love and appreciation you have for your mom, your sisters, your husband, Tim Malone. I was struck by the acknowledgement you gave to T.D. Jakes. Mm-hmm. This is a Black man, so folks who don't know, who's the pastor of a mega church, and he's a big name. And you thanked him for being your, and I'm quoting, inspiring mentor. So what surprised me was that TD Jakes once posted on Facebook, "For the record, I do not endorse same-sex marriage, but I respect the rights that this country affords those that disagree with me." So I'm just a little confused. Explain how you can be an admirer of TD Jakes when it's unlikely that if you had asked him to preside at your wedding to Tim, he probably would have said no.
Yeah. Well, you have different relationships with people for different things. And I don't think that TD Jakes, he is serving the God that he wants to serve, but yet he's not discriminating against me in that way. He wouldn't marry me. Okay, I believe that's his choice personally. Now, do I think that the church would I like the Catholic Church and the evangelical church to sanction gay marriage? Absolutely. But I understand that we're not in that time right now. Just as our former president, Barack Obama, had a change of heart and Joe Biden had a change of heart, and there were many people who had a change of heart, that you have to meet people where they are. When I listen to TD Jakes, I recognize his talent and his blessings and his calling. And he's able to inspire people. He's able to encourage people. He's able to educate people and inform people. And as long as he does that without disparaging gay people, then I'm okay with it. If he disparaged gay people and he taught fire and brimstone about being gay, then I may feel differently. But TD Jakes, and I don't know him that well. I think I met TD Jakes. Well, I did a thing about mentors, and at CNN found it funny that I said the mentor in my head is TD Jakes because I listen to his sermons and he inspires me. And then I went to his church and I did a thing on mentors for CNN. I had dinner with him and his wife and his family, and that was it. And then I think I had him come to CNN for a panel, and then maybe there was like a book discussion. But I don't really know him that well. But the man inspires me, and I think God speaks through him. So I don't have to like everything about a human being in order to respect them as a person. And even if I don't believe what they believe, even if I don't respect their views, I can still respect them and treat them as a human being. And I think that that's a good place for us to be, especially in the society right now, and we wouldn't have such vitriolic politics. So, but I also recognize talent. When someone has a calling. Now, this is going to sound really weird to people. So I will watch Fox News, and I can recognize and appreciate the talent of their anchors without agreeing with anything that they say. And I can recognize the talent of other people whom I disagree with in other fields. My friend, I have friends who's great artists. This painting here is Rashid Johnson, who's a great artist. I happen to agree with Rashid, but I can still see the beauty of his art without agreeing with everything. And if we go back over time, we have to learn to separate the man or the woman from the art, from the talent, and sometimes from their philosophy on things, if I believe that they are chosen and that's their calling. So that's how I feel about TD Jakes.
Yeah, it's almost, analogous to people who love the music of Wagner, but Wagner was not great when it came to Nazis and Jews. But people somehow figure out how to love the music.
And a lot of people still drive Ford cars. And he was an anti-Semite and a racist, right? Yeah. Henry Ford, but
yeah,
it's the world we live in.
So, Don, you've been witness to major events in American history, some uplifting and some downright horrifying, including a number of mass shootings. And you write in your book, "To this day, Sandy Hook stays with me as the hardest, most horrifying story I've ever been called to serve." That shooting was December 14th, 2012, when a gunman slaughtered 26 people, including 26 and 7-year-old first graders. So, Don, how were you able to cover that story, interview grief-stricken parents, and at least on camera, hold it together?
I don't know. I don't know how I did it. I guess, in the moment I realized that it was my job. And I think sometimes I didn't hold it together. I mean, the president of the United States didn't hold it together. Remember when he gave the press conference, Barack Obama cried. President Obama cried. I think it was, I held it together on adrenaline and sheer willpower until the end, which I write about.
Yes.
Seeing the tiny coffin that looks like, a Christmas present under a tree, the size of like maybe it was your best Christmas present, right? Um, and I said, I've got to get out of here. And I just remember calling and saying, hey, it's the weekend or whatever. I think it was my day off was coming, and I was doing a live shot, and it was a father, and I think I write about this in both books.
Yes.
The father has his head on one side of the hearse. The mom has her head on the other side of the hearse, and they're going down the street, and there's a little coffin in the back. And I was doing a live shot, and I looked over and I just lost. I said, you know what? I held it together for the live shot, and I just said, I got to get out of here. And the thing is, as I was driving away, I said, I get to go home and back to my family, and I get to get out of this. And these folks don't. They've got to live here. And then one day, very soon, all the cameras will be gone, and they will be left with silence in their grief. And so I don't know how I held it together, but that story was probably the worst story that I believe that I ever had to cover.
I think you wrote in the book that when you got home, you got physically ill.
I did. I got the flu. I think I was just holding it together. And then I got the flu. I wasn't feeling well. And then I just started dating someone, and not that long. And then finally I just gave up, and I said, look, I got to go home. And then I went home to Louisiana, and I was sick and laid on my mother's couch, and I didn't go back to work until I was better.
Wow.
Yeah.
Along this line, you write in the book, I've been a gun owner. And then you write, how did the Second Amendment become a religious belief that defies common sense and eclipses opposing views? So I found that to be profound. Indeed, how did the Second Amendment become a religious belief? And you've addressed this issue, guns, as a journalist, and predictably, there's a backlash. So tell us about all of that.
Well, look, I think it's become a religion because people, again, this is one of the whole reasons I wrote the book. There's got to be a separation of church and state, because people think like, guns are, to them, it's become their religion. It's like a god to them. It's also, if you want to look at it sort of on a secular level, it's like wealthy people or people who want to have status in society. It's like they go out and they buy possessions like, oh, I have a Mercedes, or, I have a fur coat, or I have this diamond, and I have this, and you sort of hang on to it, and it gives you, what, like, this feeling of, that you're somehow better than. It gives you a sense of worth, right? And I think that it's in our society, guns have become the same sort of thing. It gives people worth. Like, I have a gun, so I'm a real American. I have a gun, and it's been sanctioned by God that I can carry, this gun. It's in the Constitution. Therefore, it must be, and I'm just saying, therefore, it must be, a right by God for me to have it. And that's not so. There have been amendments to the Constitution because we get things wrong. And I think that we need to figure out what to do with guns. But I think guns have become a religion for people. They worship them, they possess them, and it becomes a weird possession and, sort of thing that they bow down and pray to that I don't really quite understand. I don't really get it. And I'm a gun owner. I grew up in Louisiana where everybody had a gun. Everybody had a gun. Everybody had a knife. Everybody went fishing. Everybody went hunting. And it was just that sort of thing. But I don't look at guns. We never looked at guns, except for my aunt and my sister had a gun in their purse. I don't know why they did that. But for the most part, we never really looked at it as a means of protection. Some of the women did. But for guys, it was, when I was growing up, it was a means to survive in order to, get some hunt for your family.
So you write about it in the book, and then as a journalist, when you were on CNN, and maybe since then, I mean, you've spoken out just like this, and there's been a backlash. So how do you, the backlash is coming? How do you handle that?
Well, I mean, you have to, because I handle it because otherwise, why am I there? Everybody's towing the line. I'm not a toe the line person. And I like to get people to think for themselves. And I don't like stupidity. And I don't like hypocrisy. And I don't think the profession of journalism should be about stupidity and hypocrisy and false equivalency. because there are certain things that we know are right and there are certain things that we know are wrong. And one only has to look at the Constitution of the United States. Journalists are protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. And it's the only job that I know that is listed listed in the amendments, and in the very First Amendment at that. So I have to speak out because as I write about it in the book, kids are dying because we want to worship this gun god. That kids are dying in our schools. Kids are dying by suicide. Kids are dying by accidental shootings. Women are dying from domestic violence, from guns. The former president of the United States could have been killed just yesterday as of this taping because someone who should not have been in possession of a gun had one. Just last week, there was a school shooting in Georgia because a deranged person had access to a gun. We have to stop pretending that the Second Amendment is sacrosanct. It is not. And if you really want to, I know this is crossing me, if you really want to do unto others, if you really want to be a Christian, Christians are about protecting their fellow man. That does not protect your fellow man. So that's why I speak out. And that's why I don't worry about the backlash. I can't worry about the backlash. Imagine if Dr. King had worried about the backlash. Imagine if James Baldwin had worried about the backlash. Imagine if Bayard Rustin had worried about the backlash. Imagine if Gandhi or Mother Teresa or on and on. Not that I'm comparing myself to these people, but I stand on the shoulders of these people. And so whether, a company is mad at me or stockholders in the media company are mad because they don't like me having a big mouth, okay, I'll go on and have a big mouth somewhere else. But I'm always going to have a big mouth and I'm always going to stand up for what I believe in. And I think that if we had more people like that, it would be a much better place and it would be much better journalism business in this country.
So, when I read the book, I was really surprised. I mean, you are a bit of an expert on the Bible. So like throughout.
Not really. I mean, sort of. I know the Bible, but if you ask me quite honestly about passages, I was doing research you get that.
Right. I get that. But let me just take you throughout the book. You put interesting spins on some biblical stories, spins that I found at times eye-opening. Like, you have a spin on Abraham and his willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac. And I don't want to go into it because I want folks to read it. I think it's fascinating. But another is your take on Joseph.
I knew that's where you were going.
Right? Married to Mary of virgin birth fame, right?
Yeah.
So can you just give us a little bit what your spin, your take on Joseph?
Well, I always say that you have to have an open mind and a very critical mind, right? And love. Now, it couldn't just be that Joseph was a benevolent, loving, kind man who was looking out for a woman who was not married and got pregnant. But we had to turn it into something of a miraculous pregnancy, right? A virgin birth, when chances are that did not happen. So I don't want to give it away too much, but you should read the book. You should read the book, and then you'll understand what I'm saying. I think for me, it is good enough that Joseph was looking out for this woman who would have been killed had they not made up this story about a virgin birth.
And she would have been killed because
of the laws. That was the law. If you had a baby out of wedlock, so what did they do? They fled and they got married and they went somewhere else so that people would be, they would throw people off the trail, so to speak. Now people reading the Bible or reading my book may not be happy with that assessment, but it is my assessment. And, we have to come up with all of these, things that are just beyond belief and imagination. And I try to get people to understand. Now, this is coming from someone who is a believer, someone who prays, someone who believes that there can be miracles, right? But usually there are miracles if we, I think that, we have to help, men have to help, and that there's energy and all of that. So I am a believer. But I don't know if I believe in a virgin birth. The Bible is not a book. It's a library of mythology, allegory, stories, parables, and stories that basically are to encourage us and to teach us how to be better people and better human beings and better citizens to serve one another. It's about not finding, always constantly looking for the image of God in yourself, but it's for seeing the image of God in others. So we have to stop pretending that the Bible is a book of fact and science. It is not. It's just a Bible. It's a book of lessons. It's a great story. I think it's the greatest book ever written. But we have to stop believing that it is fact, just as we have to stop believing that Jesus was blonde hair and blue eyes. That's the image of God and Jesus that we want for ourselves. And that's the kind of religion, when we do those things, when we think of it as fact, that's the dangerous territory, especially for evangelicals in this moment, of trying to create God in the image of yourself rather than the other way around. And using religion and the text and scripture to control people. That same scripture that was used to keep women subjugated, to enslave people, to demonize gay people, and even immigrants, and on and on and on. It's all in the interpretation of that. And then, I also write about, I come from a religion that believed in human sacrifice and bloodletting and all kinds of things. And you know what that religion is? Christianity.
Yeah.
Open mind, critical thinking.
John,
this book is going to piss a lot of people off. Excuse my language, but we'll get to that.
That's fine. I mean, it's not a boring book, and that's why the reason people should read it. You wrote in this book about personal family tragedies. The most recent one you just mentioned, it was the accidental drowning of your sister in 2018. Mm-hmm. For many Christians, the coping mechanism in grief is, well, God doesn't give us more than we can handle, or that was God's will. How does your faith, your Christianity how did it, and does it bring you through the death of your sister to whom you were so close?
Well, it's an interesting story because that was where I believe my crisis of faith began. And that's when I started to really question everything. Why would God do that? If God is a loving God, then why would he do that? If, I don't understand. She had 3 beautiful kids and grandkids who loved her and revered her, and there was no reason to take her away. And why would she accidentally drown, in a lake? Why did all of these things have to happen? Why would God do that? And so that's when my crisis of faith began. And that's when really I guess the seed for this book started growing even before. Well, actually, I wanted to write about my last book, This is a Fire, before, but, no one wanted to buy it. And then all of a sudden, I Told You So happened, and then everyone wanted to buy it. But I think the seeds of that book and this book are kind of around the same time, not far off from each other. And so when I finished This is a Fire, I was talking to you. You asked me about the story in the beginning, what I would tell a publisher. I was talking with my collaborator, and I was like, yeah, I was having an idea. And she goes, oh, I had one too. You know what the next idea for your book is? And we both said religion at the same time. So, I don't remember if we had discussed it during that. But, I don't know. I won't tell people if I found God. Maybe I should. Should I tell them if I found God in the end? Should I tell them? Should I get it? So yes, I'm a believer. I found God in the end. And the reason I found God is by questioning him, is by having a crisis of faith. It's by asking questions. It's by digging deep and trying to figure out the answers. It's about having a relationship and an established truth. It was about understanding that the Bible is not a book of facts, and it's not something that we should be using to judge human beings, judge one another. And if anybody tells you that they have figured it out and they know what every single text means and what every single scripture means, and that God said all of this in Leviticus and blah, 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 then ask them where the grain of salt is so that you can take it, because you should take everything with a grain of salt. Nobody has figured it out. It's all in the interpretation. That's it.
So, Don Lemon fired from CNN. Tucker Carlson fired from Fox. That was the story that broke in April 2023. And
Believe it.
when that happened, another door opened. And you write in your book, soon after I was fired from CNN, Elon Musk reached out to me with an invitation to do a show on Twitter. And you continue, it was immediately clear to me that Elon and I see eye to eye on very little. So you get fired from CNN. Elon Musk reaches out and basically offers you a distribution deal on Twitter, which is now X. You don't see eye to eye with him, as you write, yet you signed on. So tell us why, and give us a little background on that.
Well, it wasn't that easy, and it wasn't that quick. So right after I left, he did, and I said no. I said no for a long time, and then eventually he hired a CEO, a new CEO. And it was someone who was very respected in the business, and someone who people I respect in the business had known for a long time. And they said, you should wait till Linda comes, who's Linda Yaccarino. Right. And when she's running the company, then you can actually do some real business with them. But he reached out publicly over Twitter a couple of times. And then he had someone call me up, who is, a very big established person in this business who everybody would know the name. I don't know. I don't mention it in the book. I don't think I mentioned it in the book. But I'll just tell you here, it was Ari Emanuel who called me and said, you should, this is Elon, you should do it, blah, 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 blah. So I thought about it, and I had a conversation with Elon. I don't know if we spoke once or twice. I forget. And then I still said no. I said, look, I need to take the summer off and figure out what I want to do. But it was initially in my head an immediate no, because Twitter had become so toxic and so filled with conspiracy theorists and racists and bigots of all types. And I just said, and then I thought about it for a while. And then during the fall, the conversations picked back up with them, and they assured me that I would be able to do whatever I wanted to do on the platform, and that they would welcome me to be a counter to all of that. And so I went into business with them. I decided, okay, I'll do it. But the reason, if you read the book, I wasn't going to do it until I was listening to TD Jakes in the shower. And then I said, you know what? I should do it. And I still feel that I should have done it.
So, but
I think you should read the book and write that. I think that's one of the most interesting things in the book, what happened with that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you actually describe being in the shower, listening to TD Jakes and getting the spirit. I mean, you had the Holy Spirit, right? It just took a hold of you. Very interesting. But then, Don, you went the next step. And this is from your book. I was adamant about one thing. I wanted Elon Musk to be my first guest. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, looking back now, was that a step too far? Do you regret that interview? By the way, I thought your questioning of Musk was amazing. It's had more than 1 million views. But do you have any regrets? Because, that ended up creating a problem between you and Elon.
Well, it's had a couple million views, and it's been spread all over. Listen, as you know, I'm in litigation with them, so I can't really talk about it publicly, but I'll talk about it, in depth. But I will tell you what I've said further. I went into it with the best of intentions. I took him at his word, and it's too bad that he reacted. I don't like that he reacted the way that he did. I think it was unfair. But I wouldn't change. Because I went into it with the best of intentions. I had an agreement. When I make a commitment, I stick to it. I don't turn my back on people, and I don't push them away simply because I don't agree with them. So it's unfortunate that he did what he did, but there's nothing I would change. And the reason that I wanted to be the first interview is because I insisted on being able to say what I want. And that included him and criticizing him if I needed to. And they assured me that I would be able to do that. And I wanted to make that very clear in the interview. And I could not go to work without having him go to work there, without having him answer some questions. I wasn't working for them, but, right. To do this deal, because I think that he needed to answer a lot of questions, and people wanted to know.
You definitely
it was all public. It was everything that he had said publicly.
Right. Absolutely.
So it was perplexing to me that he became so upset.
Well, and to be clear, you were not fired by Elon Musk. So I want to
No,
make sure
I
people
never worked
understand.
for Elon Musk. No, I never worked for Elon Musk. There
That's
was a
right.
distribution deal where where Twitter or X would get certain content exclusively for a period of time, and then it would go everywhere else
Right.
anyways.
Right.
I was just supposed to be a counter to all of the right wing. He had Tucker Carlson on, and they were hiring. I think, but at the time, I didn't know Tulsi Gabbard and some other folks. And so, he said he wanted some people that were on the left or who were liberals. And I said, why do you think are Democrats? And I'm like, why do you think that? I'm an independent. I have some liberal leanings and I have some conservative leanings, like most Americans. And I don't believe in political parties. And so that's kind of how we started the conversation and then went on from there.
Wow. Don, do you envision a time when you will return to cable news?
I never say never, but right now it's not on my radar. I would, again, never say never. And listen, some of the things that I'm doing them just so you know, contractually. We have in businesses, not just in broadcast journalism or television, whatever, people have contractual obligations. You have non-competes. And so you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can go on, because otherwise you're in violation of your contract.
Got it.
Yeah.
We have so many questions from folks who have our viewers here. So I'm just going to throw a few out to you and let's see what we can do in the next 15 minutes. Okay, here's a question. As a public figure, how do you deal with critics, online bullies, et cetera, who attack you professionally and personally?
Oh, well, gosh, I've had to deal with it for so long that quite honestly, most of the time when people people will call me or text me and say, "Oh my God, I read this thing that you're under fire for something that you said, or that you're trending." And most of the time I don't know, because I don't really go into the comments, and I don't really, I don't really pay attention to those things because I would be immobilized. I respond to the things that I feel that need explanation, but otherwise, quite honestly, in this sort of environment, most of the time things move on, and the news cycle moves so fast that they're going to get off of me and find something else. So if it's something that I think that really needs to be addressed, then I will address it. Otherwise, why do I care how many haters I have? They're going to hate me anyways. You're never going to make everybody like you.
What are some of the biggest challenges facing journalists today?
The corporatization of journalism, that's a huge thing. People are too afraid sometimes. And also, cancel culture, I think it's consequence culture for the most part. Are there people who have, been treated unfairly and should not have been, jettisoned from their positions? Absolutely. I think of Al Franken and that sort of thing. And I think people on the left tend to eat their own, and they get rid of many voices that are very helpful to them, because they want to signal some sort of virtue, which is, it's surprising to me. And then people on the right just support their people and continue on. And they realize that people are human and they make mistakes, and that we're all fallible. And they just continue to say, "Hey, look, this person said something I didn't like," or whatever. Look how many chances they've given Donald Trump. Can you imagine having a candidate like that on the left? As soon as he said, on the day when he announced that, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists about, immigrants, Democrats would never have supported him. I'm just saying liberals would never have supported him. So I think cancel culture is a big obstacle issue when facing journalism. And I think that because of the times that we're in politically, many journalists, and especially the bosses, feel that you have to give voices to the other side just because they think that that's balance, and that's that it's equal then. But that's not necessarily so, especially when people are not operating in truth and facts and sanity.
Here's another question. What is the best piece of professional advice that you've received, and who gave you that advice?
I can't remember who actually gave me that advice, but it was don't I don't know if it actually came from someone in the business, and maybe it was just my mom. It's like, don't worry about what people say about you. Don't worry about what people think about you, because then you would never get anything accomplished. So I think that was my mother. And then it was really funny. It's surprising where advice comes from. I remember sitting in Chicago on the anchor desk when I worked there, and my co-anchor, we were talking about something, about me living in Chicago, and it hadn't, treated me very well because I was an outsider, and they were making me feel like I'm an outsider, and everything I did, they were criticizing. And the people in the building were jealous because they wanted to become an anchor, the main anchor. And NBC had brought me in from New York, and they were just, I was getting hammered. And she just looked at me and she said, bloom where you're planted. And I said, you know what? I'm planted here now, and I'm going to bloom. And that's what I did. And then eventually CNN came calling.
Tell us about the Don Lemon Show.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I love that show because it is whatever I want it to be, but also I love it because I get to tell the truth. I get to say whatever I want to say. I don't have to worry that someone in one of the C-suites or a news manager, or quite frankly, someone's, standing at a cubicle who may, oh my God, I'm so offended. I can't believe Don said that. And I don't have any of that. And the freedom that comes with that is, my gosh, it's invaluable. And I wish that, all of my former colleagues and all the folks in the business, I imagine some people do because they have, great support from their superiors and the people at work. But I wish they could feel that feeling, to be able to just get on a platform and say, it's awful that the former president was, that someone, was a possible assassination or attempt on his life. But for him to blame Democrats and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for inciting violence upon him and others is absolutely ridiculous, because we have videotape, we have memories, we have a brain, and we have all, as journalists, been called enemy of the people by Donald Trump. And so to pretend that that didn't happen, if you want to take the rhetoric down, I will agree with that. But let's look at your own rhetoric and the responsibility in that. Not that it caused this to happen to you, but it contributed. Possibly, you should ask yourself, has it contributed to an environment that has caused this weed to grow and flourish? And that's, you can say that. But if you say that on television, oh my gosh, you're blaming the victim. There's no nuance at all. There's no context. So you have to weigh every word. I don't have to weigh every word. I don't have a boss. My boss is me.
Right. So let me ask you. So it's the Don Lemon Show, and you get a call, and the call is to interview Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And you get another call, and the call is to interview Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. So first question, would you interview Donald Trump? Would you interview Harris? And if so, can you just give us maybe like one thing you might ask each of them? So first, why would you interview Donald Trump if he's spouting these kinds of things that are getting people outraged?
Well, I would interview Donald Trump. Number one, I'm not going to hand him a platform where he can just spout lies without me going back at him. And also, I'm the kind of journalist that I think that I can handle him. And I know that I've interviewed him 6-8 times, and he's not going to steamroll me because I'm going to present him with facts. And if you mentioned my other interview, right, with the richest person in the world. And I ask questions without fear or favor, but I would make him I would make him answer the question. And I don't think I would, I could interview him live. I could moderate a debate with him. Like I know how to, get him to answer questions, just as Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, knew how to bait him. I know how to get him to answer questions, and also to stay on track. You've got to be, when you're with a bully, you've got to, and you don't have to insult them. Like being insulting and flippant to him doesn't work. Now, I won't tell you at work because I don't want to give away my secret. But yes, I would interview him because I think that you should. Look, the man is running for president of the United States and there's a very good chance that he could be the next president again. So I think it is your duty as a journalist to interview him. but it's not your duty as a journalist to just have him come on and spout lies or whatever. So this is the same thing for any other candidate. Same thing for Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, she doesn't have a history of doing that. Mm-hmm. But what I would ask her is, I would want to know about and get a good answer from her about why she has changed on issues. And I think there's a very good answer for that. She got presented with new information. And smart people, when they get presented with new information, they are prone to change their minds. And so I think that's what I would ask her. And what else would I ask her?
Let me just throw out a comment, though. I would love to have you be the moderator of a debate between the two. And if there's any way that could happen, I would love to see that happen.
Well, I think you should pray. And why don't you write the DNC and the RNC or what have you? But that could happen. I don't know, between her and him. I don't know. We have only 50 days left. And I don't know if either side would agree to have me moderate, because they know that what do I have to lose?
I would love to see it, I think. Here's another question from our listeners. What are some qualities or skills that a good journalist or interviewer should develop?
Patience. And it's okay to patience and energy. It's okay. You don't have to just sit there. Sometimes it's good to just let people talk, because then they show you who they are. But if you look at the British press, they have mastered pushing back against politicians. And I think part of it is in the way that their government is set up. And they every single day they have example after example of their government officials, their prime minister, their politicians in parliament going back and forth at each other, hashing it out. And we don't see that we don't see it that way. People standing up, the prime minister stands up and says something, and then someone pushed back and said, well, if the honorable prime minister, whatever, such and such, and then they are going back and forth with each other like that. And it's not this sort of clown show that you see in Congress and the Senate a lot. So I much prefer a democracy, and I like our form of government. I just wish that there was more of an opportunity to push back without fear of favor, without cancellation, and to be able to go back at politicians. And people are afraid because they don't want to cut Donald Trump off, as we noticed during the debate, because they may be afraid that they're going to seem biased. We should not be worrying about that. Yeah.
Don, do you see yourself ever getting into politics?
No.
Never?
People have asked me a lot. Someone said, you should, people have told, when I was at CNN, you should run for president. I'm like, there is no way in hell. People have said I should run for mayor. Look, again, I would never say never, but I don't really like politics. I'm not political. I just don't. I'm just curious, and I like facts, and I like to know how things work. And I don't like conspiracy theories and lies. And so, it's tough to be in politics without embellishing things, right? And so, and that's tough for me, because I'm just really honest, and I really just say things as I see them and as I believe that they are. And it has paid off for me. Sometimes it gets me in trouble, but even when it gets me in trouble, I still believe that it pays off.
But don't you think that we need people who are truth tellers and honest in politics?
Yes, but it's so toxic. But, I don't know. I don't. Here's the thing. I don't like asking for money, and that's a big part of it. And I do like people. I love people. I like being out with the people. I love working for the people. I work for the people now as a journalist. So who knows? If it was just that part where I didn't sort of have to be all things to all people and go around and really ask for money, which I really just hate doing, then I would consider it.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope everybody's listening on that. So another question from our people who are our viewers now.
Our esteemed viewers.
Yes, it says, one of them is this. It says, you appear to be, and I'll take out appear, you are a hopeful individual. How do we get back to a middle ground of respect in this divisive and polarized time?
I think it's the same way that I dealt with my crisis of faith. It's the same way that I dealt with being fired from CNN. I think you have to dig deep and you have to ask, instead of why me, why not me? And I think first you have to become honest with yourself. And you also, the same way that I feel about, with my deeply religious evangelical brothers and sisters, I don't agree with them trying to make America into a theocracy, which is part of the reason I wrote this book, is to get people to think. And I think we have to realize that we should not be creating laws in America. This will be a huge help for everything. If we could only not make Sunday morning or whenever we go to church the most segregated place on earth, a segregated place in America, then that would help. But also, if we could also get this image of Jesus out of our heads, that he was blonde hair and blue eyed, that would help, because then we would be getting closer to reality, right? If you believe in Jesus and you know where he came from, which part of the earth and the world he came from, then you would realize that that depiction is wrong. And that would get people to change. It would help with racism, because then Jesus would be like this brown person, right? This Jewish, dark-skinned Jewish person. And so that would help with anti-Semitism and racism and what have you. But if we realize that we should not be creating laws based on our religious beliefs or the Bible or on faith or any of that, that would really help. Because then we get back to helping one another. If you don't believe in something religiously, if you don't believe in a woman's right to choose, then don't have an abortion, right? If you don't believe in gay marriage, then don't get gay married. If you don't believe in, any of it, if you don't want to hire an immigrant, I mean, that's discrimination. But if you don't believe in it, then don't do it. Because it's shocking to me that people read and talk about the Bible and all those things, and then they demonize everybody instead of trying to figure out how to help and how to make things better. So I think that if we just sort of had a common shared sense of reality and stop treating the Bible in ways that we want it to be instead of the actual thing that it is.
So we have, I think we have about maybe 4 or 5 minutes left.
That's it.
Yeah,
that was fast.
Time flies when we're having fun.
Wow.
So that's a question. I like a really quick response, and then we'll close it out.
Yes, ma'am.
You write in your book, you have an interesting take on DEI trainings, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you write about it from personal experience. So could you take maybe, 2 minutes? Just give us a little teaser about what you wrote.
So I write about how it is dangerous if DEI becomes a religion, as I write about it's dangerous that guns have become a religion, and DEI has become a religion for people, and it can be used in myriad ways. You can use DEI to help improve the company you work for, the workplace, the workforce, the country, the world. But it can also be used as a weapon to get rid of people, to indoctrinate people, and it can have undue influence on life. And I would encourage you to read the book about how I feel about DEI. And it's going to be surprising to some people. Like I said, a lot of people are going to go, whoa, I can't believe that. But DEI can be used in a way that discriminates against the people who have been mainly discriminated against in society. If it is used as a religion, the people who have the power in society have figured out a way to turn it to get rid of people who don't have power.
That is a fantastic teaser.
Yes.
Don, I'd like to close our conversation by asking you to read one of many lovely passages in I Once Was Lost. And if you would turn to page 158, and there's a passage that starts with I suspect. And if you could read that for us, I'd like to close out with that. I just think it's a wonderful passage.
Okay. Oh, wow. It's kind of what we're talking about here. because listen, people think the book is just about religion, whatever. But it's not. It's about politics. It's about the world. It's about everything. It's about women's reproductive rights, et cetera, on and on. Okay, so I started. What you wanted? You said I suspect, right?
Correct.
I suspect that this book will spark a lot of anger in liberals and conservatives alike. I try to be an equal opportunity disturber, following to the best of my ability in the footsteps of Jesus. They call him the Prince of Peace, but Jesus was the most influential disturber of all time. Those of us trying to unfollow his lead can't just sit here and be passive in the name of peacekeeping. It's time for quietly progressive Christians to get loud.
Wow. Thank you, Don Lemon, for getting loud.
Thank you. And it's an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to Don Lemon, author of I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. We encourage everyone to purchase I Once Was Lost at your local bookstores. Support our independent bookstores. If you'd like to watch more programs and support the Commonwealth Club's efforts in making virtual and in-person programming, please visit commonwealthclub.org/events. I'm Ladaris Cordell. Thank you, and onward.